Hi, I like to play video games. I also like to talk. If you're listening, that means you're on Media Chatter, the place where I talk about a lot of things, especially video games. Today, I will be talking about a normal and not controversial topic corporations. Specifically, I'll be talking about what makes games worth the money, with a specific highlight on the differences between AAA games made by large publishers like Activision, Nintendo, and Epic Games, which have thousands of employees each, and indie games made by smaller publishers like Team Cherry, Stress Level Zero, and New Blood Interactive with teams under 25 people, Team Cherry specifically being a 3-person development team. The reason I want to talk about this isn't just to yap, though honestly, what other reason could there be for an alpha gamer podcaster such as myself? It's for you. Yes, you, the gamer. I want to discuss what kinds of things a gamer should, in my opinion, think about before they buy or experience games from AAA or indie companies. I want to explore the nuances of both types of published games through the lens of what I like to call the 3 C's. Which, yes, I'm sure there's a euphemism you can make there, but shut up. The 3 C's I'm talking about are creativity, consumerism, and community. 3 things I think make up a lot of what's important about gaming culture that might be considered by the humble gamer when buying games. They're all pretty self explanatory. Creativity deals with the imagery and actual gameplay of the game with an emphasis on how games feel and how enjoyable they are. Consumerism talks about the actual price and other money related aspects of these games and if they're actually worth your money. And community talks about the discussion and multiplayer condition of the games a person would be entering. This aspect is technically optional if you just play single player games, but a lot of games are multiplayer or have a pretty distinct player community, which is why I'm choosing to talk about it. I've done a couple interviews and a couple readings for this podcast, so let's get right into it. This is a transition.
In fact, you can have a game where you've spent tens of millions of dollars to produce something, but it might be pretty flashy, right, in terms of, beautiful graphics and so on and so forth. But those games get forgotten. The games that are smart and that kind of understand human behavior are the ones that work.
That was a game development professional and professor I had the pleasure of interviewing for this podcast. I'll let him introduce himself.
Professor Anthony Ellertson, the director and founder of the Games Interactive Media and Mobile Program.
He works mostly in games not for entertainment, as he put it, and mostly in coding. A lot of his games are in VR or augmented reality, such as a project he did for special education involving personal space. He did this by creating an augmented reality where the player sees a series of circles around their feet.
And we turned that game over to a series of teachers, and we got really good feedback from that. And the games, I think, helped to reinforce that. And so I think that was a good project to kind of bring together.
Very cool stuff. He and the GIM program has made a lot of projects like that involve augmented reality and VR, and their work has been really helpful and inspiring to many people. He also really likes Bioshock. In fact, he likes it so much that he teaches an entire class on it.
Yeah, you should. It's honestly, it's wonderful. And that it was one of those games that, when Irrational brought it out, it had a kind of a beautiful artistic look and feel to it. The gameplay was really sharp, first person shooter. Um, but um, but what was, I think, the most fascinating part of the game was that it used basically um, two different types of game theory um, systems to basically to control the gameplay. And
He goes on to explain the two. First, the dollar auction, the mechanic behind the dollar bill bidding/vending machine that supplies the player with health and buff items. He talks about how Bioshock understands the human psychology of bidding, not wanting to lose anything at any cost, and upping the ante.
that's the first premise of BioShock, because it is it's a city under the water in which you're playing against a series of other um, antagonists that are and literally your actions are destroying the city, and yet you keep upping the ante, right?
Oh my god.
And human beings are the only ones that'll do this.
Okay.
So it speaks to our irrationality.
Second, the prisoner's dilemma, the mechanic behind the Little Sisters, little girls who have been kidnapped and brainwashed, and the player needs to decide whether they harvest them for Adam, which are basically skill points that make you more powerful, or rescue them for much less.
It's very disgusting, right? And you have this weird choice in the game in that you kill little girls and take the things that, take them the power that they've been harvesting, or do you let them live? And you get less power if you let them live. And you have to make decisions on, do I trust something to happen, or do I trust my compatriots, or do I trust the process to be at least fair or beneficial to me, or do I decide to be selfish?
Interesting. Bioshock is a AAA game made by Irrational Games and published by 2K Games in 2007, who also publish games like the Borderlands series, Civilization, and XCOM. The company that owns 2K Games, Take-Two Initiative, is worth about $41 billion as of April 2025, and BioShock specifically had a budget of $25 million. It has won a truly staggering amount of awards and is honestly considered to be one of the classic pillars in AAA gaming. As Ellerson explains, it absolutely earns its title through its clear passion for its morals. Not to spoil anything, but Bioshock is also high rated for its twist ending, which is considered one of the best twists in video game history, that also speaks to the game's understanding of its first person medium. But again, I won't spoil anything, it's a game to be experienced, in my opinion. However, this AAA titan of the industry isn't the only game Ellerston cites as one he values as a favorite.
Have you ever played an old game called Flow?
I have not.
Flows is beautiful. That's an indie game. It's a beautiful indie game where you're you're this little organism at the bottom, you're a little worm actually at the bottom of the sea, and you're eating other little organisms to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then of course you have to worry about the ones that are already this big or bigger than you eating you, right?
Okay.
But the game is actually pretty peaceful, and it plays off another kind of human psychological trait, and it's in the title flow, right? It's this flow state where you're not really, you don't have to think a lot. You're just kind of you're moving that character through this beautiful environment, this nice little music playing in the background. That game cost hardly anything to make.
Flow was made as a free Flash game in 2006 by two people and reworked in 2007 as a $6 PlayStation 3 game under the independent company That Game Company, most famous for Journey and Sky, Children of the Light, with assistance from Supervillain Studios, who worked on 4 Tony Hawk games. It's simple, like he said, not much more than a couple lines on a screen, but its beauty and swelling feeling of something so small and unflashy can't be beat. That style is honestly trademark of That Game Company. I should know, since Sky is one of my personal favorite games, one I think everyone, despite their experience in video games, should play. But anyway, Ellerston believes in games that understand human psychology and have compelling and memorable gameplay.
You might have tens of millions of dollars. That's great. I'm sure you'll produce a beautiful experience, but will it be a lasting and meaningful experience? Not necessarily, not unless you've thought about the human being.
I really can't say anything better than he can. Like, how do you even follow that up? That's what games are, a simulated experience you have control of, and games that understand that concept are games that will, fundamentally, be remembered. At this point, it's kind of a game to game basis that has nothing to do with money. The entirety of what makes a game creative and fun seems to depend on intention. Whatever a game intends on being is probably what it will be, whether it's an intuitive mastery of the human psyche and narrative, or something with really beautiful graphics, or something to experience and laugh about with friends, or something else. What is that something else, particularly? There's a 2025 study by students of Curtin University School of Management and Marketing called Strolling Down Memory Card Lane: Nostalgia, Age, and Video Game Remakes. It studies 12 hypotheses on nostalgia in games, with a special emphasis on how nostalgia will affect game sales. One hypothesis was that gamers will purchase more video game remakes of original games they have owned or played than games they haven't. Statistics show that gamers own about 5.05 remakes on average. This phenomenon is nicknamed nostalgia bait by the gaming community. AAA games more commonly take advantage of this since indie games are usually individual installments. A personal example of this I can cite are the recent Pokemon games, specifically Pokemon Sword and Shield and Beyond. Fans of Pokemon, including myself, has had some major gripes with the series since its port to Nintendo Switch, specifically the massive bugs and cut corners that seem to have just gotten worse every game. Pokemon Legends ZA is the most egregious example to me. That game specifically is a continuation of Pokemon X and Y, which is my favorite Pokemon generation of all time. Despite having a $13 million budget from a company worth about $150 million, it apparently doesn't have the money to include windows that aren't literally JPEGs pasted on the outside of a building in a game that takes place entirely in a city. My opinion on Pokemon is its own podcast, but I'm not the only person who feels this way, believe me. It earned a 78% on Metacritic, a record low for the company. But the thing is, the game that ZA is rebooting is almost a decade old, and it holds a lot of callbacks to that game. And because of that, and despite all its flaws, it still earned about $200 million in its first week. That is just something else you get without passion, understanding, or creativity, and it's bought anyway. That's when you get to the second C, one of the most controversial ones, the one with the dollar signs in the eyes and the angry piss in the pants. This is a transition.
For me specifically, it's about if I'll have a good time. It's regardless of quality when it comes to money. Um, if I'm having fun, whether that be laughing at or with a game, it was worth my money. Whether it was worth my time is an entirely different question.
Right. That was a snippet of one of 2 interviews I had with 6 of my Epic Gamer friends. They'll introduce themselves in a bit, but first, in this segment, we're going to be talking about 2 specific aspects of money and video games, since talking about all of it warrants its own episode. Specifically, we're going to talk about what makes a game worth the money, and if adding more buyable content to a game makes it better or worse.
I'll go first. My name is Seth Blevins, known in most places online as Theft_Wizard. I'm a gamer.
Hey, I'm Noel. I don't feel like giving away my username because I'm too sick to care. I've been I've been enjoying video games for about as long as I can remember being a person with the thoughts and feelings beyond me want blank. Uh,
I am Matthew. My screen name is Matt Modib. Um, and yeah, I've been playing games since I was around 6 years old.
I'll just go with my actual name, Ian.
Same here. My actual name
Yeah,
is my screen name because that was funny.
His name's Cash. He didn't say it for some reason.
Okay.
I'm Marcus. That is my
Okay.
name.
Okay, great.
These friends are very avid consumers and players of video games. The Steam library I share with not even all of them has over 100 games in it, and they talked a lot about game hours in these interviews. Marcus and Cash specifically invest a lot of time in video games to get really good at them. Marcus has a reputation among the group as being especially cracked at games known to be hard, like Elden Ring. Cash and Marcus made an insane direct statement about his hours.
For only Smash Ultimate, which, to be fair, is the main one I play, I hardly play the other ones, like 750 hours.
Hey, I have over
Combined.
400, says the Switch.
That's still a lot.
And that doesn't consider how much.
That is a
that doesn't-
massive amount.
That doesn't consider how much, because to be honest, I don't even play on my Switch anymore. Me and Alan have been playing on his Switch primarily.
Oh yeah, that's still 400 hours.
So
Really
I would
close to,
Not
probably
exactly
add
baby numbers.
another 100.
400 is like 20 whole days.
Yeah.
Pretty close to like 19 days or something like that.
Super Smash Bros., specifically Ultimate for the Switch 1, is a AAA game released for Nintendo, the newest installment being the 6th out of a 27-year-old title. It is the best-selling fighting game of all time, worth about $40 million as of 2025. As they do not touch grass, as indicated, I figured these fine gamers would have some pretty solid opinions on the consumerist perspective on games. And they did. The first question on the topic I asked them was, what makes a game worth the money to you? The general consensus, and a very good metric in my opinion, was that a game was worth the money if it was worth the time or the experience. Marcus compares price to hours directly, citing 2 of his favorite indie games.
Like spending a lot of time in games and truly achieving like mastery in some of them. So, for instance, I tend to lean towards indie games because something like Risk of Rain 2, I have 370 hours in
Oh, good lord.
because it is so replayable. It's very difficult. I know I got a lot of time out of it. I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. And that was like $20.
Right.
Brutal Orchestra, I have 250 hours in. And I have gotten a lot of time and a lot of enjoyment out of it. And I have 100%ed the game. And I'm trying to work on 600%ing it, or 500%ing, not 600, because there's 5 save slots, and I like it that much. And that was like $12.
Good lord.
Risk of Rain 2 released in 2020 and was developed by the now non-existent 2-person team Hoopu Games. It was published by Gearbox Publishing, a company connected with Valve that had its own line of independent games. It was a commercial success, selling 4 million copies by March of 2021. Brutal Orchestra released in 2021 and was developed by a 5-person team. It was published by Hellbent Games, a 100% indie game publishing studio, which has only published 11 games since their conception in 2006. Seth, the voice at the beginning, is a casual connoisseur of jank games, or games that have visible bugs and glitches. One of his favorite games is Cyberpunk 2077, an indie game that became a huge commercial success, but due to market strain released with some major and infamous glitches that made it almost unplayable before it was fixed in updates and patches later. He reloads the unpatched version for fun. Here, he talks about Bloodlines 1, a game published by Activision based on a tabletop role-playing system. It was released in 2004 on the Source Engine, the same year the Source Engine was created.
All right.
Like, for example, I started playing Bloodlines 1, and it was very funny, and I think it was worth the $20 for how hard I laughed that night at, kind of jank quality game, from, like, the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm probably not going to go back to it because it was kind of like I didn't feel it.
Oh.
My Steam library is filled with like remarkable monetary investment with like 45 to an hour minute playtime. Um, just because there are games that blow me away and I want to put 100, 150, 200 hours into them. And there are games that I want to put an hour into and say I got my 20 bucks worth out of that.
Right.
That's it depends on what spending, I guess.
Cheap, jank games are a niche that is enjoyed by many a gamer, as shown by Seth's Insanity. It just kind of depends on what time you want to have for your money. Not everyone can or wants to put their money into games that don't hold their attention for longer than 45 minutes, though, especially when you're a broke kid, the target audience for many a game studio. Noel cites his experience.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really have like money for video games in general until like more recently. So usually the answer is that like nothing was worth the money for a while because I just I didn't have any. I was a little kid with no allowance.
Right.
Like if I wanted something, I'd have to wait till like I got birthday money. I think it's like longevity, I think. Like if I put enough time into a thing, I will have considered it worth the money that I spent on it.
So, the conclusion here seems to be that in the gaming consumer market, money equals time, that time that can be spent playing and enjoying a game. Which, of course, makes a lot of sense in hindsight, but considering these kind of things when you actually buy a game and think about the money you're dropping is important. You should ask yourself things like, does this look fun? Will I be playing it in a week, a month, several? Stuff like that, though it obviously depends on preference. Sometimes, though, game companies know this. It's an easy path to make. More money equals more time, which equals more content a game needs to be engaging. Which is why, sometimes, the need for content to make money worth it can skew in, arguably, the wrong direction. AAA games are notorious for this, specifically in a phenomenon called microtransactions, which is when a game includes extra content or a way to get more in game currency with real money, and downloadable content, or DLC, which is basically just new content like story or world expansions. I asked these gamers their opinion on this kind of content, and they sure had some opinions. Specifically, Seth and Noel talk about Fortnite, a AAA game published by Epic Games that I'm sure everyone is kind of aware of. Fortnite is a freemium game, which is a game that is technically free to download but includes microtransactions that let you buy the aforementioned skins, along with a Get More Things subscription called the Battle Pass, emotes, etc., etc., etc.
Because I will stand by, I think Fortnite's an all right game. It's like it's not going on my top 10 or nothing, but like kill time, it's not bad. But like
It's funny.
it's funny. For Hatsune Miku's jumping a motherfucker for looking at me funny is objectively hilarious. Um, but like all the microtransactions, they are shoved down your throat. If you don't have any skins, really, why are you playing? Because that funny factor really goes away.
Right.
I can confirm that those few like month and a half I spent being like unbuttered, uncooked toast, like next to everybody else, I felt fucking like naked, dude.
That is, like he said, how they get you. Games like Fortnite depend on the player feeling left out or like they missed something. Most everything you can buy in the store is some kind of limited time offer, and if you don't get whatever skin is in there, you have to wait and hope it comes back. No matter how you slice it, it's kind of predatory.
Right. So with microtransactions specifically, um, I think it depends on how intrusive the developer makes them. If it is something in the background that you can pay more if you want, it's not going to destroy your time. You're still going to play our game, you're still getting our game to the fullest. That's okay. If it's shoved down your throat constantly, monetary, 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 it starts to get a little scummy, especially because you kind of have to design that kind of marketing philosophy around like slot machines and children falling for it, and then it gets like real malicious.
Yeah.
Seth is talking about the scary, scummy slot pile that is the wonderful world of mobile games, or games you can download and play on your phone. Not all mobile games do this, obviously, but many of the higher grossing ones do. Not to get too into it, because mobile games and video games are kind of different enough to warrant their own videos, but the really popular stuff like Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Roblox, or even Candy Crush all have some kind of in-game store or method for the consumer to spend real money on. And these games make money, a lot of it, and console games take notice and copy their methods. Obviously, it should be said that these kind of games are, in fact, playable for free. It's why they have such a huge user base. As of 2025, Fortnite had only 650 million registered players globally. But it should still be said that these games are trying to get you to spend a lot of money on them, which then becomes up to the player whether they want to spend that money and time on those practices. It should also be said that most, not all, but most, indie games don't do microtransactions, or at least not a lot of them, which we'll discuss later.
Mobile is devious with it. My stepbrother got in trouble for buying like hundreds of dollars of Robux
Oh
one time,
God.
and I remember him getting chewed out and me walking in and laughing because you deserve it at that point, like a little bit.
Oh God. Yeah. No, that's just
I-
sad.
Yeah, and it's designed that way. It is designed from the ground up that way.
Yeah.
It's designed to get you. It's designed to max out your dopamine so that you can throw your credit card in there. And it's like sad. It's really sad that like instead of just making a game you could be proud of or like an online game with like cool mechanics, you have a basic game with funny skins or whatever. I can only feel that slot machine-esque meme culture that's like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I bought this? And I can't even say I'm innocent. I can't even say that I am innocent.
You did buy the Hatsune Miku.
It's not the only thing I bought either.
It's not. You did give Shin Godzilla J's.
I did. Godzilla with Jays is really funny, and I'm a sucker.
Another way games can get you to spend more money is on DLCs, or downloadable content. Basically, a game will release optional extra content, such as a new map, more story, etc., that can be added on to an already existing finished game for a cost. These are different from microtransactions since they are usually characterized as large epic changes to a base game instead of smaller stuff like skins or currency. Sometimes it can be great. The DLCs for Hollow Knight, an indie game produced by three-person Team Cherry in 2017, were free and included in the game as an update to wild success. However, the current expensive state of DLCs have a lot of opinions attached to them.
See, when a game doesn't come out fully released, and it's through you have to unlock it through DLCs and expansion and like this other thing that's not a game at all, which I think is really cool. I'm not harking on it, but I'm just thinking that a lot of modern games nowadays release extra things not because it's going to be cool and expands on it, but it's more things for the consumer to spend their money on, and that gives me the ick when it's big companies marketing it to you and you're the product.
So, with the current state of DLCs, right, I am wildly upset because usually DLCs are something that is announced like half a year, 2 year after the game has released, gotten more money so that they can actually develop that stuff. But now, game studios are starting to announce DLCs before the game has even released.
Right.
So you can spend $15 extra for something that could have been in the base game. And
Stupid.
is probably, yeah, like I know you want the new Pokemon game, but the new Pokemon game has a DLC that was announced before it was even released for like what, $30?
Yeah.
So
Damn.
yeah.
To reference what I yapped about before, Pokemon is a AAA franchise by Nintendo that I'm sure even non-gamers are tangentially aware of. To add on to the cost of DLC, the base newest Pokemon game for the Switch 2, Pokemon Legends ZA, costs about $80 before taxes. While these are both optional parts of a game, there's something to be said about the morality of this kind of viable content, especially in these examples. However, like an onion, this issue has layers. Controversial take here, but viable content in video games doesn't have to be bad.
Yeah, there's some nuance here, and it's in execution. There was a point in time where I'd kind of look you dead in the eyes and go, bad, all of it, burn it like vampires in the Catholic Church. But like,
Bible content.
and then the game specifically, Helldivers 2 came around, where I think like microtransactions can be done well if they are unintrusive. If they are a thing where like you aren't like bombarded with ads, buy this skin, buy this skin, buy this skin. It's more like things you can do. There's battle passes here, but if you don't take them, you're gonna have just as much fun. that is all right.
Seth is talking about Helldivers 2, a wildly successful Steam game developed by student-started Arrowhead Games Studios and published by Sony. It's sort of considered to be a tangential indie game, with Arrowhead itself controlling most of the online functions of the game rather than Sony. It's considered one of the best games of all time and won 18 awards in 3 years. I personally would highly recommend it if you like exploding things and nationalist satire and exploding things. Noel also added an example of a DLC from Payday 2, one of his favorite games.
One example I can think of from another one of my favorites is all of the DLCs you can get in Payday 2 because they're all so like small, and also what they give you is small. You can pay like an extra $3 to get an extra like 2 weapons. Um, but if you're the kind of person that gets caught by, oh hey, look, um, then that like $3 a pop can become like a lot of money at once. Um, but I don't know. I still can't blame them too bad for that because they do account for that and let you buy the DLCs like in bulk, basically. So I like they're not trying to bleed you dry, or at least they weren't before they came up with the idea of making it a fucking subscription service. But that's like that's new Payday's fault. That's Payday 3's fault.
Payday 2 is an indie game released in 2013, developed by Overkill as their fifth and so far last game, and published by 505 Games. Like Seth said, the concept of money in games is nuanced, especially when the subject is generalized like I'm doing here. There are factors to consider in video games like console fees, development cost, game size, how many mechanics, how many models, what programs are used, etc., etc., etc. But what is important to take away here, I think, especially as a modern day gamer trying to figure out where to put their money into, is specifically what kind of content is worth it, and how much money are you willing to spend. Through that lens, AAA is generally more expensive than indie games, with large modern franchises sometimes coming up to $60, $80 per game, and the most expensive indie games being around $40 to $50, though most indie games on places like Steam average about $20 to $40, sometimes as low as $5. To wrap this up, there's a research paper presented in 2023 at the International Conference on Information Systems by 2 members of the Indian Institute of Management, titled Reigniting the Flame, Sustaining Usage Through Intermittent Releases of In-Game Content. It's mostly about DLC content, but it also has a stance on the difference between AAA and indie video games, specifically talking about indie games, that really underlines the point of this segment for me. Indie game developers value sustained collective engagement in the process of creating games much more than achieving growth or making profits. Whitson et al., 2021. Lack of access to resources entails that the developers have to take on multiple roles, including interactions with the entire indie ecosystem. In the context of indie games for gamers, the games as an artifact may be of secondary importance compared to the access to the creators' communities of taste and identification. While profit maximization or gaining popularity might not be the only objective of indie developers, it is nonetheless important that the gaming community purchase their games and provide funds for their sustenance. Basically, AAA games are much more interested in turning profit than indie games, though indie companies still need to turn profits to exist, and AAA games will generally have more money to spend on your games. Having that distinction helps, I think. Decide what you prioritize in games, which is basically the defining feature of this segment. I'm just over here taking community opinions like a chump. But some would argue community opinions are also pretty important to an industry where community cooperation is a core aspect of gameplay. This is a transition.
If the discussions are shallow or contentious or posturing, they're probably not useful.
Right.
But I do think it's often the case too that a discussion about a game will break down into talking about the story and the ideas and how the game played out and how different scenarios in the game played out, and that those are useful because I think that's kind of part of what I was saying a few minutes ago. It builds to the notion of wisdom of looking at a problem and coming up to what is maybe the best solution by seeing it from multiple perspectives.
Now, this is the controversial section. It is also the shortest. The gaming community is, in a word, notorious. There have been a lot of extremely infamous, shall we say, incidental people and issues in the gaming community that may influence people's interpretation of the media. For example, the buggy game I mentioned earlier, Cyberpunk 2077, had to release so early in development partly because the community surrounding it were sending the developers actual, genuine death threats, sometimes about them and sometimes about their families. But in my opinion, the gaming community is also important, incredibly so. For example, a huge amount of games are multiplayer, with whole genres depending on the function. So, of course, you do need to consider the community aspect of a game when you're getting into when you need to talk to the community to play the game. And of course, what isn't limited to multiplayer is the urge to talk about your experience with other people, which a lot of people do not just for games. That's how fandoms start and survive, which is another entirely other podcast. So if you ever want to talk about your gaming experience online, you need to be aware of the community you're joining. And for some people, that's a make or break aspect.
I've probably sunk in over like 800 hours on Call of Duty Zombies. And the big reason for that is centralized community, keeping up servers, and like, I'm gonna be real with you, Call of Duty Zombies is the only game series that has got me lurking in forums.
Oh.
Forums, like internet forums. Like, I don't do that much, but Call of Duty Zombies has kept me in there.
I wish I could. I would. Well, I was gonna say, like, community isn't really a make or break thing for me. It probably is. There is a game, Rainbow Six Siege, that I quit years and years ago. That's another like 300-hour title or whatever that I have in there. I used to play that game so much, and I enjoyed none of that time. God, I hate Siege. Everyone sucks. They're all the most. Okay, well, to be fair, like, most of them don't talk, but the people that do talk are like 90% of the time really toxic for pretty much no reason.
Damn.
Same thing in Valorant. I don't really play Valorant too much anymore. That's not really the reason, though. Stuff like that. Sometimes if a community is just bad enough and I actually can choose to avoid them, I will.
Call of Duty Zombies, Rainbow Six Siege, and Valorant are all AAA games developed by Activision, Ubisoft, and Riot Games, respectively. And I'm not going to be able to go into the truly baffling intricacies of the gaming community because I don't have time, and truly that's its own monster of an episode. But I really do want to highlight the importance of knowing what you're getting into with that kind of thing. Your experience with what you value emotionally and monetarily in games should be valued, but so should your experience with other people. Humans are pack animals, unfortunately. This is a transition. In conclusion, I need to touch grass. In other conclusions, I think basically what I'm trying to say here is that no matter how much money gets dropped into a game, it's kind of the content of the game that should determine whether or not you should try to experience it for yourself. I asked all the people I interviewed the main question of this podcast, which was, what do you think is better, AAA or indie games? Now, usually I'd use my own voice here, but Marcus came up with an analogy that honestly I couldn't top if I tried. Though that might be because I don't like coffee.
It could be the difference between a Starbucks and then your local coffee shop. A lot of people support local businesses or local farmers or whatever they like to support because it is local, homegrown, and someone is working out of their garage or they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and they started working on it. And sometimes in this industry, I would argue most of the time, the smaller developer can make something so stylized and different that your Starbucks wouldn't dare try and make. That can really hit exactly what you're looking for. So I would say the majority of the time, it's probably a better decision for the community as a whole to support your local coffee shop that is owned by a small family. But at the same time, I love sticking it to the man, but I still go to Walmart. In general, AAA companies wouldn't be so massive and filthy rich if they didn't do most things objectively correctly, where the majority of players do engage with it. Even if I think that my local coffee shop makes the best coffee and they styled it perfectly and it can never be like, it can never age poorly. Like, there's a reason that they are how they are.
Yeah.
There's a reason
something was
coffee's
done.
made out of beans.
I think that certain indie games are leagues and miles in every way conceivable better than like AAA games. But at the same time, like those indie games are still indie and they're not AAA.
So, like what you like, buy what you buy, play what you play. Just be aware of what you're getting into and who you're getting it from. That, I think, is how you evolve, you could say, into the best kind of gamer we can be, which is an oxymoron. Gamers all suck. Thank you for listening to Media Chatter. I'd like to thank Professor Ellerston and all my friends for putting up with my shit and letting me sit you down for way too long to talk about this stuff. I'd also like to thank my English teacher, Dr. Kim Carter-Cram, for giving me a cool and epic assignment like this to work on. I'd also like to highlight Ian, who did not get screen time in the interview portions because of time constraints. He is cool. He likes Luigi's Mansion. He also thinks you should play Vib Ribbon for the PS2.
The PS1 rhythm game, where it's entirely black and white vector graphics, and you play as a little like vector rabbit running on this vine, and it plays a lot with speeding up and slowing down the tempo. But the coolest bit is that you can take out the game CD and you can put in any music CD you want, and it will generate levels for that music CD. And just the creativity and the style and everything is cool. It's a really cool game.
It's so cool.